individuals. To each of you, members who have been appointed as a member of the Youth Commission, I'll take you one at a time and give you a couple minutes to tell us why you're interested in serving on the Youth Commission. And then I'll open it up to counselors to ask any questions that they may have. And then I would anticipate that we'll be able to take a vote on all 6 items at once. But if not, we'll handle that at the time. So let me read these into the record. First item is item 345-23. This is the appointment of Emma Zhang as a member of the Youth Commission. Item 346-23, the appointment of Zach Gusinoff as a member of the Youth Commission. Item 347-23, the appointment of Serena Chand as a member of the Youth Commission. Item 348-23, the appointment of Phoebe Anthony as a member of the Youth Commission. Item 349-23, the appointment of Nick Makura as a member of the Youth Commission. And item 350-23, the appointment of Chloe Lee as a member of the Youth Commission. So like I said, I'll go in that order. I'll remind you of which names and what the order is, but also please correct me if I have mispronounced any of the names. I don't like to mispronounce names. And I did ask 2 of my children how to pronounce the name. And the first one is Emma Zhang, and I heard that it might be Emma Zhang. So please set me straight, tell me what it is, and tell us why it is that you, Ms. Zhang, are interested in serving on the Youth Commission.
Yeah, you pronounced it right. It's Emma Zhang. So good evening, everyone. My name is Emma Zhang, and I'm a senior at Newton South High School. I'm interested in serving on the Youth Commission because I've been on the advisory board for the past 2 years. And the commission to me is like a platform for me to share my voice and my ideas and advocate for the issues that I'm passionate about. And at the same time, being able to collaborate with a community of equally passionate peers. What inspires me the most about the commission is that it's made up of youth, and it's also a group of youth advocating for youth. So it's by the youth and it's for the youth. And that inspires me to, take action and inspire change in the community.
Thank you very much. I like the allusion there to Abe Lincoln. Always a good allusion in my book. Zach Gusinoff, please go ahead and tell us why you're interested and how I've mangled your name if I have.
No, so it is Gusinoff, but I don't blame you. It's a very difficult last name. So hi, everybody. My name is Zach Gusinoff. I'm a junior at Newton South. I've also served on the advisory board for the Youth Commission now for 2 years. And I think that being a commissioner allows you to do something pretty unique, especially for youth, and that's promote voices from everywhere. That's not just the commission, but also schools. And specifically within the commission, I know for me, when it was my first year, it's pretty intimidating to speak up, right? Not everyone knows a lot about local government. And I think just making sure people are welcomed, that's very, very important. And just to touch on a couple of things that are important to me, I like to focus on mental health, but I do recognize that's very broad. So I particularly like, academic stress and how to deal with that and evaluate ways you can deal with that. And also, anti-Semitic events and the stress factor that comes from that, just to everyone, not just in the Newton South where I go to school, but in Newton in general.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Serena Chand?
Yes, hello. I'm Serena. I'm a junior at Newton South. I've been an advisory board member for 1 year as part of the Youth Commission. And I think the Youth Commission itself offers a really unique opportunity that's honestly quite limited for the youth as a whole. A lot of times, youth in our community don't get a voice in a lot of the decisions that concern us, including for our schools, for our city as a whole. And the Youth Commission offers an opportunity not only for the commissioners and for the advisory board members to be able to represent the youth, but for us to elevate those voices and give more way for the youth to get involved in our city. So the main reason I want to be on the Youth Commission is in order to elevate those youth voices and create the change that they want to see, implementing initiatives that I know that my peers want to see in our city and that I know that adults in our city would also benefit from.
Thank you very much. Let me quickly note that we've been joined by Council Maria Greenberg, who's a member of the committee from Ward 1. The next person on my list is Phoebe Anthony. Ms. Anthony, please tell us why you're interested in serving on the Youth Commission and if I've mispronounced your name.
No, you pronounced it right. Yeah. I'm Phoebe Anthony. I'm a senior at Newton South. And when I initially joined the Youth Commission as an advisory board member, I wanted to represent youth who may not feel comfortable giving opinions and ensure that everyone's voice is heard. And I hope to shape Newton into a safe space for young people of diverse backgrounds, and I want to increase those efforts and involvement by becoming a commissioner. At school, I'm part of the debate team, and I've gained particular knowledge and understanding of the important traits of good policymakers, and that includes listening to everyone's perspectives with a sense of integrity and funneling that information into an action or policy to promote a certain cause. And I hope to put these traits into my work as a commissioner. And last year, I was involved as Youth Commission in the Community Engagement and Communications subcommittees. And one of the things that we aimed to do was to increase awareness around bike lanes and biking in general. And I noticed that at the Newton Earth Day event, I represented the Youth Commission there, and I collaborated with Bike Newton and Safer Routes to School. And I noticed that many younger audience members, they weren't aware of the Youth Commission as a whole. So I mentioned to them, and I tried to plug the Youth Commission, and I noticed that how important that the youth voice is in the local community and government. And I think that the youth voice can influence those, in power, like policymakers and representatives. So I want to ensure that everyone's voice is always heard and that we always hear from different perspectives. So yeah.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Nick Makira.
Yes. Hello, my name is Nick Makura. I'm a junior at the Roxbury Latin School, and I'm interested in becoming a commissioner. So I believe it would absolutely allow me to continue being an active voice in the community here in Newton and allow me to engage in several causes that are incredibly important to me personally. And I'm interested because I've been serving on the advisory board of the Youth Commission for a year now. And my first year on the Youth Commission helped me foster my passion for community service and activity. And not only through the amount of opportunities I was able to gain personally, I was able to speak at the Martin Luther King Day celebration as a representative of the Youth Commission, but also seeing the impact that my peers and I were able to have through the numerous initiatives that we were able to be a part of and participate in, and the impact that we had in the community. And I think that for me, serving as a commissioner on the Youth Commission would allow me to continue to have a voice and continue to help others and educate others, while also fulfilling my goal of being an active member of the community and really working with my peers and working with a body of like-minded individuals here in the community here in Newton. Thank you.
Thank you, Nick. And I remember seeing you speak. And so I'm glad you're here tonight because I thought it was excellent. Last, Chloe Lee.
Hi, I'm Chloe Lee. I am a sophomore at Newton North High School, and last year I was on the advisory board, and I really loved the opportunity of meeting new people and problem solving. I'm interested in becoming a commissioner on the Youth Commission because I really love helping out my community and making a change in this Newton community, and I love the experience of meeting new people, especially this diverse group of our community, and brainstorming effectively and implementing innovative solutions to come up with new ideas to contribute to this community. And one thing I really am passionate about and I really want to advocate about is the mental health area, because I believe mental health is such a big part of high school students' lives. And I really connect with this topic, especially because it has influenced my family's life. And I feel like I really want to, advocate mental health.
Excellent. Thank you. Before I turn it over to counselors for questions, Ms. Kennedy, was there anything you wanted to say? I know you're kind of pinch hitting tonight, but I know how supportive you are of this. So just wanted to give you an opportunity if you wanted to weigh in.
I'm incredibly proud of the individuals that are here tonight. We have gathered in the beginning of September and have a group that's inclusive and has different viewpoints, which I think is really important, and share towards a common goal. So I'm incredibly proud of these young people.
Excellent. Thank you. I'm going to go to Councilor Humphrey in just 1 second. My first question is usually, I have 3 teenagers, and they also, they go to school with a number of you, and usually I want to ask why my kids don't sound as intelligent, as articulate as you do, but I think that's not necessarily fair for you all to answer. So I'll take that one on myself. Let me go to Councilor Bill Humphrey. Councilor Humphrey, do you have a question?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, first thing I'm going to note is that I recognize a bunch of these names and faces from various events around the city all year long. And that's a good thing, I think, because that means we know you're in it to win it and you're for real, that you're going to be at these meetings contributing in a positive way, because you're already doing that all around the city. So I like to see that. The question that I tend to ask all the Youth Commission appointees as they come through, there's no wrong answer. It's just, think about it. Let us know if you have any thoughts. Is do you think that we should allow 16 and 17-year-olds to vote in city elections? Obviously, the rules for federal elections and stuff are controlled in the U.S. Constitution. But, I'm someone that thinks we should allow 16 and 17-year-olds to register to vote in city elections. And I'd be curious to know if any of you have any thoughts on that. That's my question. And then I'll be happy to move approval after that.
Thank you, Councilor Humphrey. Do any of the appointees want to weigh in on that? You can unmute yourself. Unless you're not able to unmute yourselves, or unless none of you want to weigh in. Jacqueline, they can unmute themselves, right?
Yes, they can unmute
Okay.
themselves.
You can also just give a thumbs up if you support allowing individuals 16 and older to vote in municipal elections, if you're more comfortable with that.
I'll start.
Yeah, go ahead,
so
Phoebe.
actually, this is something that we talked about. So I went to Massachusetts Girls Day, which is like a government, it focuses on government. It's a sleepaway camp for a week. And basically, we talked about these during like our general education sort of meetings. And I've heard a lot of different people like talk about this and their different perspectives. And one of the perspectives that stuck out to me was that one girl had said that her sister was 16 years old and she had to pay taxes. And so her argument was, if my sister has to pay taxes and she's 16 years old, then why can't she vote in like a federal election? And I think that kind of resonated with me, and I agree with that. I think that if you're old enough to pay taxes, if you're old enough that you're making an income and you need to pay taxes off of that, then I think your voice should be heard in government, regardless of whether you're, under the age of an adult or whatever.
So thank you, Phoebe. Did anyone else want to weigh in on that?
Yeah. I
go
totally
ahead.
agree with Phoebe. Okay, thank you. I agree with Phoebe. Like she said, if you're at the age to pay taxes and drive and do all these things, then voting is also, a privilege that you could have. The other point I want to make is that voting is absolutely a habit that should be reinforced throughout life. So when you start younger and are able to vote at a younger age, that carries on later into life and produces more civically active members of our community and the country.
So thank you. Did anyone else want to weigh in? I want to make sure you all have a chance if you want to. I'm not trying to put you on the spot, but if anyone else wanted to weigh in. I mean, obviously a concern would be, we were all elected, and would you be wise enough to elect people like us? But I have confidence that you would, so fear not.
Or to get rid of some of us.
Maybe that's a better point, Councilor Humphrey.
Yeah.
Well said. Well said.
Well, I just, to pick up on the point we just heard, one of the big challenges is even getting the, 18 to 22, 25 and beyond to vote, partly because if your first experience voting is when you're already off at college and then you've got to figure out how to register and get absentee ballot or maybe vote where you are, that's hard to form that habit, which means you're then setting yourself on a path to not voting for quite a while in many cases. And, I'm sure many of you are as passionate as I am and always have been about climate change. And I think we'd be in a real different position on climate change policy if we had had a lot more young people voting for quite a long time, not just now, but, for the past, 15, 20, maybe even 30 years. So as I said, Mr. Chair, I'm happy to move approval on all of these wonderful appointees to the Youth Commission.
Thank you, Councilor Humphrey. Let me take a few more questions from councilors. President Albright.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was wondering if one of you could describe how you decide what initiatives you're going to approach in the course of a year, and just tell us maybe one of those initiatives that you've been working on.
why don't we do this for the appointees? If you want to raise your hand, if you're interested in responding to the question, that way I can, in case more than one person is interested, happy to go that way. I see Zach Gusinoff.
Yeah. Can you hear me? Yeah, there we go.
Yep.
So I definitely think that part of it is what we were able to accomplish the previous year and sort of learning what worked, what didn't work, and what was most effective. For me personally, as I mentioned, I'm passionate about mental health. So my goal is to create an event that kids can look forward to rather than stress about. So at my school, we have what's called Aware Club, which is basically kind of doing exactly that. They're trying to bring awareness to the fact that kids can get counseling services, and they're trying to promote these fun events. So I think just coupling kind of the idea that we can take what we did last year and learn from that, and sort of gaining new resources and joining new activities, that sort of paves our way to, choosing what we want to do and the most effective way to do it.
I'm not familiar with the Aware Club. Or Aware Club. That's interesting. Thank you, Zach. Appreciate it. I'll just give another opportunity in case any of the other appointees wanted to weigh in. You don't have to. Okay. Next, I see Councillor Greenberg, followed by Councillor Noel. Councillor Greenberg.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to say how impressed I am with these young folks, and I look forward to this every year when they come before us, because it makes me feel hopeful and very positive for our city's future. I'm so happy that they would like to have the youth more engaged in civic events and issues. I think we really need their voice on the city council, because you have a bunch of folks on the city council who are very much older, making decisions that will directly affect these young folks. So we need to hear their voices, and I hope that you guys will attend more public hearings and make your voices heard at public hearings. It'll be important to hear that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Greenberg. Councillor Noel.
Thank you. I just want to agree with Councillor Humphrey and Councillor Greenberg with how impressed I am by each and every one of you, and your names are familiar. So we've seen you, around the city doing civic engagement. And not only do I think we need your voices, I'm on the bandwagon that we need your vote. I agree with, if you're paying taxes, you should vote. Also, we're making decisions that impact your future. So you should have a voice in that. So I'm very impressed by all of you, and thank you for thank you for your efforts on this.
Thank you, Councillor Noel. Councillor Greenberg, is your hand back up, or was that a remnant? Okay.
Oh, so I'll take it down.
All right. So Councillor Humphrey has moved approval of items 345-23, 346-23, 347-23, 348-23, 349-23, and 350-23. Any more discussion on that motion? Okay, I suspect we can do this all as one. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay. Thank you. Congratulations to all our appointees. The committee has approved you. It will go to the full city council. You do not have to stick around for the rest of the meeting. You are welcome to, but we are not offended if you go do homework or anything else that you have to do this evening. So thank you all very much. And again, congratulations.
Thank you, Councillor.
The next item is item 420-23. This is discussion and possible amendment to the city council rules to add an ethics commission or committee. And although I know most of the people were here to see the youth commission appointments, this is something else that we need to take up, so we will. At the beginning of our discussion, let me point out that we're joined by, as I said, City Solicitor Ali Giuliani. Michelle Pizzi O'Brien is also here. She's the head of HR for the city, to help us with our discussion. It's going to be an open discussion. I'll turn it over to Councillor Noel in a moment to talk about why she filed this item. But what I want to say is that this is not an opportunity to litigate a particular situation that happened or talk about fault or culpability or responsibility or non-responsibility for events that have happened, but really an opportunity for us to talk about whether there should be some changes to our rules and whether there should be some process moving forward to deal with situations like the one that led to the filing of this item. So I would appreciate if we can try to keep our discussion on point and on the merits of that question. With that said, let me turn it over to Councillor Noel, who filed this item, to see what you want to say. Councillor Noel.
Thank you. And I just want to say thank you to the chair for putting this on the agenda so quickly, recognizing that this is the last meeting of the term. And also, you know, I've given a fair amount of thought of what can actually be accomplished tonight. So for those of you, I'm sure everyone has reviewed the packet, and the issue at hand is if somebody has a concern or someone has an experience that they are concerned about or want to elevate, we currently don't have a mechanism on the council in which someone can have an investigation occur, or if there is something that reaches a level of some type of action, there's no actual roadmap of consequences. So our clerk, Ms. Norton, has provided us with several links today she emailed out to the committee to give us some examples of what some other municipalities have done. We also have Solicitor Giuliani here. We also have our HR director, Michelle Pizzi O'Brien. So I think we have a lot of thoughtful people who can contribute to this. And I don't know for a fact if we're going to be able to put something in place tonight, but the purpose is to sort of have a discussion, engage what the appetite is. And then my hope is next term to work as a citizen with the city council to refile this and move forward with some actionable items. So I have some thoughts based on what Ms. Norton sent out to us, which I'm happy to share, but I don't know, Chair, if it makes sense to open it up right now, or if I should share some of my initial thoughts based on what we reviewed.
First, let me make sure that everyone received the links that were sent out. I don't know if everyone's had a chance to go through them or in depth, but hopefully, you know, it was designed to give a sense of what some possibilities are, what some other communities do, what some other cities or towns or bodies do. The Mass Municipal Association has given things like this some thought. So we wanted committee members to at least have some background and some familiarity with, you know, sort of the scope, the world in which we're operating in the scope of possibilities that currently exist. Not to say that we are limited to those, but just to sort of, you know, give some food for thought. Do any other councilors want to weigh in before we hear from Councillor Noel what her thoughts are? Okay, Councillor Noel, go. Sorry, President Albright, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to Councillor Noel's comments by saying that I went to an MMA webinar on this very issue, I don't know, 2-3 years ago, and I've expressed interest for our council to create such a code of conduct. And I didn't have much pickup at the time, so I think that the moment to move this issue over the goal line and get it done, and probably in the beginning of next term. So I thank Councillor Noel for bringing it up.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, President Albright. I'm not seeing any other hands. So with my added appreciation for the filing of this item, let me turn it over to Councillor Noel. Share with us what your thoughts were, and either folks can weigh in after that or react to what it is you have to say.
Sure. So again, I want to thank our clerk, Ms. Norton, for pulling stuff together. And I think when I reviewed all the different examples, what I was struck by is, and I think this is probably where this gets really difficult, is the code of conduct. The different dockets had code of conduct that were could be construed as incredibly subjective. And I think that becomes really difficult to enforce. You know, there was language in some of these examples, like, you know, not being rude to another counselor in a meeting, which of course we would all hope that we would have that standard, but then who gets to define what rude is? So what struck me by the code of conduct examples is, you know, enforceability. How do we enforce some of these things that could be construed as subjective? The two areas I think are not as subjective is any form of sexual harassment or discrimination. I think that there's definitions of that exist. I think investigations could occur and that those things could be determined somewhat clearer than whether or not a colleague is rude to another colleague. So one of the things I was thinking, and then there's also a couple different ways to go. There's internal oversight among the council or having external oversight. And then I spent a little time talking to Josh about this because one of the ways in which this particular council is governed is through our charter. And so if we were going to, I asked Josh, and he can speak to this more, pardon me, Councilor Krinsman, if we were going to add something to this, would we have to change our charter? And then if we did add something to our charter, it would have to go before the state. So I would love to hear people's thoughts on this, but one of the initial thoughts I had in terms of a beginning is
we just start talking about the docket item.
I think everyone needs to mute.
Go ahead, Councilor. Yeah, I think it was the username Laura, but she muted. So go ahead.
One of the initial thoughts I had is, what if we carved out, sexual harassment and discrimination acts of, and asked our law and human resources if they would be willing to create the oversight on that. And I don't even know if this is where I'm looking to law and HR. If we said, okay, in those two categories on the city council, we want to defer to the city's policy on it, if there's a way to do that. That was my initial thought.
Let me first answer the question, or sort of respond to the not question, but point you raised in terms of charter, which is accurate as far as I understand it. And I will obviously allow myself to be corrected by Solicitor Giuliani if I'm wrong here. But my recollection from serving on the Charter Commission was that there are two ways to amend the municipal charter. You can either do it through a charter commission, which is a process set up in state law, or you can file a home rule petition with the state and have the state legislature pass a bill that actually amends the charter of a city or town. And so if we were to try and seek a change in the charter on this topic, those are the two procedures through which we could affect that change. In terms of procedures, we could also, the city council rules are certainly within the scope of authority of the city council. That is 100% within our authority to change those rules, assuming that they're changed within the bounds of state law, within the bounds of the charter, et cetera. Ms. Giuliani, before I go too far, do I have that right? Have I led us astray in any way?
No, you have not. That's correct.
Okay, thank you. And by the way, if I say things correctly, please feel free to jump in and just reinforce that the chair has really nailed it from time to time, because that's always welcome. In terms of the topics or the points that Councilor Noel raised, I want to allow others to respond to that. And let me also say that we've been joined by Councilors Kelly, Leary, Danberg, Laredo, and Kalis. If I have missed others, give me a wave or let me know, and I'll mention you as well. Councilor Humphrey.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Sorry to be a little bit redundant here, but could you just clarify again the distinction you're making in terms of whether something would fall within rules changes versus requiring an actual charter change?
I don't think I spoke to what would be appropriate for either of those mechanisms, just that those are the mechanisms and the procedures which we would follow to make a change in that way. In other words, if we wanted to include a code of conduct or include a particular set of rules around the city council and enshrine it in the charter, there are two ways to do that through changing the charter. If we want to make a modification to the city council rules, that is something in which the authority to do so is vested in this body.
Yeah, the thought that I'd been having over the last several days as we looked at this docket item and some of these links was it would be, easier to add something into the rules, but that also feels a lot less kind of binding. On the other hand, if you pass something as a charter change, even if you go through that whole process, you have to make sure that it's flexible enough that it doesn't need to be updated every single time that you're updating something. I thought Councilor Noel's point a few moments ago makes some intuitive sense about referring to some existing policies to a point, right? Like that would give you some guidance on what type of things are no-nos. And then in terms of what to do about that would be something that you would put, either in the rules or maybe even in the city charter. so that there's sort of a more binding enforcement thing. I did find it interesting, the enforcement section listed in the notes from the town of Harvard, Mass. Like they have a pretty strong enforcement provision there. I mean, it's not like, totally ironclad, but it's not just please sign this and be nice to each other thing. It's saying this code itself gives the authority to, conduct investigations and things like that, and that it's supplemental to any issues under the law, right? Because I think as we also just alluded to a few minutes ago, there are some things that are just straight up potentially against the law in some cases as well, right? And it's not just a question of decorum or something like that. Like you could potentially make a case out of it, and you certainly would in basically any other setting, other than the fact that it's a little bit weird that we're elected officials, so we're not quite city staff, we're not subject to HR and so forth. This was something that I had been thinking about a lot over the last several months as we watched some of the drama at Congress. They recently expelled a member. They keep having these endless votes over potential censures and expulsions of various people. Obviously, that's not great in general, but they do have a mechanism there. And I did find that, thought-provoking in terms of that, should there be at minimum a formal mechanism of censure on the city council? I don't know if we'd really be able to, expel members. That almost feels like something that probably is a state constitutional matter at that point. But, a censure proceeding makes some amount of sense to me. That's probably something that would be under rules as opposed to the charter, because that's about the internal governance of the body and how we, treat one another and so forth. Obviously, as has also come up at Congress, the problem with any of these, whether it's censure or anything else, even impeachments, things like that, is when you have a political body doing the investigation and the trial and the conviction on those things, it's not necessarily a justice process at that point. Sometimes it's just a political process, which is like the huge risk whenever you introduce a system like this. And that's the thing that I was even saying, maybe we could put something together in time for tonight and vote it out before the end of the term. But the more you think about these potential pitfalls, it's like, okay, no, we're going to probably need to work on this for a while and come up with something that we feel comfortable with, that's not going to have a whole bunch of unintended consequences. Because I would certainly never want to get into a situation, I'm guessing everyone here probably agrees with this, of creating a mechanism that is eventually used by like a simple majority of the council to say that they don't like some particular person because they disagree with them on some political issue, right? I mean, all of us at one time or another has said something that that the other members found to be like offensive to their sensibilities, even if it wasn't necessarily considered to be offensive to everyone, or like it wasn't like not necessarily culturally offensive or something. But some people feel very, very strongly on certain political issues, and if you take the opposite position, it's no longer a matter of like difference of opinion, and they feel like that's attacking something really fundamental. So I definitely want to make sure we get this right, but I do think we should do something. I think not having any sort of code is a bad idea. I think not having any sort of enforcement provisions is meaningless. So I'd like us to try to do something that allows us to look into these things. And I had also wondered, like, why isn't it common to have at the city level an ethics panel, whether it's a city panel or even just a council panel? Like, I don't know, is there any city or town in Massachusetts that has a council that has like an ethics committee, or even an independent, blue ribbon panel, something like that? You could potentially even have it split and say, we want an outside panel to look into accusations and then present findings, and then a committee has to step up and vote a recommendation to the full council. You could also have safeguards in place where somebody, you have, let's say, 3 to 5 members who are appointed at the beginning of each term, and then you have two alternates or something. And so if either the person who is accusing or the person being accused objects to one of the members on the grounds of that they might be biased in some way, then you have alternates ready to go. And that way people feel like there's, some sort of a fair proceeding happening there. These are some of the things that, I had been kind of brainstorming in the last week or so. But I do think, like, given what we've seen happening at the federal level, without getting into anything that's happening locally, it just seems like it's probably, unfortunately, beyond time to have something like this really kind of set down clearly in writing. I think we all wish that we could all just always get along and be respectful to one another and so forth. And that's the ideal. And unfortunately, sometimes that doesn't happen. And I'm always been of the school of thought that you should plan for those scenarios that you hope don't happen, and that you should plan for future people to occupy certain positions that you can't necessarily envision, or you're not thinking of specific people. You never want to just say, well, I know this particular group of people who are in the offices right now, and all the policies should be based around that. You should always say, well, what if 5-10 years from now, it's a different set of people with different values? How are they going to use these rules, or how are they going to use the lack of rules? So that's my take on it at this point. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Humphrey. Appreciate that. That was very well said and well thought out. I appreciate a lot of the points you made. President Albright, followed by Councilor Baker. President Albright.
Thank you. So I was sort of hoping that we, just as our rules determine what the committees are that we have, that our rules could specify that we have an ethics committee that could be the place where issues are brought. We don't have, we're not going to expel. I don't think that's, I don't know if that's legal or not, but I think just to have another set of eyes on issues is an important factor at setting a standard of expectations for how people should behave. I mean, we've had odd issues come up over the last couple of years, some odd campaign behavior, some folks who fail to come to committee meetings for months on end. We've had counselors say in a public meeting that what the first counselor just said was BS. I mean, I really do think it's time to have a set of rules, not rules, but expectations about standards of behavior, not just Counselor Noel raised with us, but all kinds of things that I've seen over the last several years. Nobody's going to be, as I said, nobody's going to be expelled from the council. I don't think we have the authority to do such a thing, but I do think it's important that we have a standard, and that when necessary, we have a place to report when a standard has been broken, and a way of discussing the matter with the individuals that are causing the issue. I'm not ready to come up with a code of conduct tonight. I like the one, I forget which one it was, that somebody's comment was that it was short and sweet, but to the point. So I think we have some work to do in studying the examples that we've been given, as well as the model that the MMA puts out. But I do think this is our opportunity to make it happen.
Thank you, President Albright. Having not yet spoken, I'm going to go to Councilor Baker.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So a background that may be helpful in thinking through what to do here. Just to mention that we do have some very limited provisions in our rules now that are part of what councilors are obligated to do. It says every member, when about to speak, shall rise, address the presiding officer, and limit remarks to the question under debate, avoiding personality. Councilors shall also address each other with respect, and in debate shall refer to other members by their respective boards et cetera, and any other such designation as may be intelligible and respectful. I mean, we have something in our rules that is some standard of conduct. We've also have some best practices for conduct of committee meetings, and where there is a specific reference that if there's a problem, take it up with the president and so forth. So we have some things already in two different forms, one a rule and one a best practice. Obviously, the very small pieces of conduct conversation, but they're there. The second thing is that I wanted to inquire if we can, in an appropriate moment, to talk with the city human resources and the the city council, city solicitor, just what is the city's own conduct different from the conflict of interest law? We have city policies that govern appointed officials for specific kinds of conduct, not elected officials, but appointed officials that we might learn from. And then the third thing is that I think we're all concerned about recent situations, but also trying to think prospectively. But I just have to report that this is now my 40th year in this role, and my general experience over the years has been that there are times when matters get heated and people certainly get exercised about issues. But as a body as a whole, the city council really has been an extraordinarily collegial body as a general matter. And so I want to be a little cautious about starting down the road of a formal code of conduct that in my experience has not been breached often at all. But I do think that obviously recent experience has made this a much more sensitive concern. So I guess my question is, and then finally, I'd just like to associate myself with the idea that we are probably going to need some time to work on this, and whether this is an appropriate matter for a subcommittee or some sort of group smaller than this body or the successor to it in the new council to reflect upon and take up. But I guess the question I would like to return to is just to get what advice we have or information we can get from our own city solicitor and human resources staff about what conduct codes we have for city appointed officials as opposed to our elected ones.
Chair, do you mind if I would just respond to some of the comments before we hear from the city?
Go ahead, Councilor Rowe.
So, Councilor Baker, I have the utmost respect for you. I don't know if we've been sitting on the same council for the last 6 years. I don't know if you had an opportunity to review the packet, but we have gone very far afoot from just being respectful to each other. And I don't think that this is a moment where things have gotten heated. I think it is a moment where we have lost our way. And the time is now to address this. If there ever was a time, the time is now. And I encourage you, you and I can have a conversation offline. We can walk through the packet. I'm happy to share with you more of my experiences. I've been a professional for 30 years. I have never been in such a misogynistic environment than on this city council. So I think we have some work to do. And if that's not your experience, I applaud you. It has 100% been my experience. So it's all the more reason where I'm very concerned as we move forward with this, that we do not isolate the oversight on this just to leadership, in case the problem is with leadership, or in case the leadership in place has a different perspective or a different experience, because I would not want if someone was experiencing some form of harassment or discrimination, for one person to then be able to define that moment as, Billy being Billy or whatever that is. I think there has to be some oversight outside of this body or some type of panel that is a cross section for exactly the point you just made, that it is not your experience. And so you very eloquently sort of indicated that we're overreacting right now, which I actually think we've been underreacting on what's happening on this council for quite some time. And the last thing I'll say, and that I'm very concerned about, and which is why my opening statements were what they were, is that I would never want this to be politicized, because we have seen some hijinks nonsense on this council. And, many people who have served for a long time have said that the council has never been as divided. And I would want some safeguard against people utilizing whatever we put in place for just political gain. But I do feel passionately that I very respectfully 100% disagree with you that this is a moment and that we have been nothing but statesman-like for the past 40 years. And I don't think that is everyone's experience.
I wouldn't say we're statesman-like, but I respect the point you made, and I certainly honor that. I'm just giving you a little of my historic perspective, but I grant you my perspective may not be accurate. So,
right, thank you.
I appreciate you saying that, Councillor Baker. I appreciate you saying that.
Thank you, Councillor Baker, and thank you, Councillor Noel. It is impressive, Councillor Baker, that you've been on the council for 40 years. I think for those wondering at home, he was first elected when he was 2 years old. So, Solicitor Giuliani or Ms. Hitsy O'Brien, does either one of you want to answer the questions that were raised? Sort of eliciting, some input from you.
Well, Mr. Chair, if you'd like, I'm happy to answer the question of, do we have policies in those areas? And then perhaps
exactly,
Ally can speak to, the details of them if necessary. But
yeah,
if I heard the question right, do we have harassment policy, code of conduct, all that? So the three policies I can think of that would apply in this circumstance is our harassment prevention policy. We also have a code of conduct, which in the HR world, we look at somewhat of our house rules, expectations that over and above what's set by federal or state law. And then we also have the conflict of interest law. Out of those three policies that employees are trained and required to, sign off on and read and be in compliance with or whatnot, the only one that does apply to the city council is the conflict of interest law.
So I appreciate that. Thank you very much. I think the question wasn't necessarily, does it apply to the city council, but are those resources there for the city council to potentially utilize or look at in terms of crafting something council specific? Was that the question? Do I have that right, Councilor Baker?
Yes, and I guess the sub question about the code of conduct you referred to above and beyond the conflict of interest law, as opposed to the harassment, which is obviously a very serious matter, does it relate to how employees are relating to each other? Just because that's sort of what we're asking in this context as well.
Thanks. Ms. Giuliani, it looked like you had unmuted. Did you want to respond?
Well, I think I should let Michelle respond to the code of conduct question, and then I'm happy to jump in on the topic as well.
Thank you, Ally. Councillor Baker, what I would add is certainly our policies would be something I would suggest anyone take a look at. But I have not seen the resources that our city clerk sent out. I'd like to take a look at those. I do think there are so many resources that are much more specific to elected bodies. But to answer the question, Councillor Baker, our harassment prevention policy generally deals with unlawful harassment and discrimination as defined by state or federal law. Our code of conduct, just so you know, these are all policies that we look at constantly, and we're actually looking at to review and at this time, because it's something that you should look at all the time, especially if there's changes in the law. The code of conduct is a policy that sets a standard higher than that. There are certain portions of that policy, Councilor Baker, that may or may not apply to the elected body. Perhaps I was thinking attendance, but I'm sure you may have some expectations on attendance at council meetings. But, you know, there are things related to attendance and civility and professionalism that are outside of unlawful harassment or discrimination. And then I think we all understand the conflict of interest law, but I'm happy to speak to that one too, as well, if you'd like, Councilor Baker.
No, but I think the part that the harassment obviously is a very important, and discrimination is these are violations of law and the conflict of interest laws of law. But the code of conduct, it would be useful, I think, for us to see what that is. That's all I'm just saying going forward. But I yield to other colleagues to that question. Thank you.
Thanks, Councilor Baker. Councilor Greenberg?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I agree with Councilor Noel that this is the time to do this and not to put it off and have a working group and a commission, and months will go by before we have any regulations in place. I was really surprised that as a city council, we already didn't have this in place. I wasn't aware of it. And I'm just wondering, why can't we as councilors just fall under HR, under their code of conduct and harassment regulations? Why do we need to have separate ones? It seems like it would all fall under them anyway and not have anything more specific. It's just basic behavior and conduct that we need to keep track of.
Thank you, Councilor Greenberg. Councilor Humphrey?
I guess this is actually sort of related to the question that Councilor Greenberg just asked, but from law and HR, if something, along the lines of what was in the packet or something else, in the same, similar vein, similar territory, happened between two city employees, or between two appointees on a commission, what's the policy there? What would be the expectation in terms of what would happen there? I understand that it's different for the elected officials, which is getting to Councilor Greenberg's point, but I'll get back to that in a second.
You're asking sort of who enforces the code of conduct for municipal employees or commission members? Right. And like who investigates, who enforces, what are the consequences, that kind of thing. Sure.
Mr. Chair, do you want me to take an effort at that, or Allie, would you like to? You let me know.
You go right ahead, and I'm happy to follow up.
Okay. Councilor Humphrey, thank you for the question. I would say for our harassment prevention policy, we have a process where an employee can make a complaint. There are multiple ways an employee can make a complaint. The HR department investigates those. We make a determination on if a investigation is needed, what steps have to be taken, if we should bring someone from the outside to do a neutral investigation, whatever that might be, and we go about that process. If they're in a union, there's typically rules there on how to handle that. That is how we would handle it with employees. You asked the question of appointed boards. I will probably have to lean on our city solicitor for an answer to that one, because the members of those boards don't fall within the city's employee harassment prevention policy.
Yeah, Ms. Giuliani, do you want to speak to sort of the difference between municipal employees and commissioners, councilors, appointees, other potential status?
Sure. So the harassment prevention policy certainly does apply to our employees. And just if I can go backwards and address Councilor Greenberg's question about why the city council doesn't adopt that policy or specifically or a code of conduct is, it's not that you can't, but the harassment prevention policy, for example, is designed to address employee issues where, as the employer, the city has authority to render consequences, to make some sort of finding that results in some action by the employer. the city does not have that level of authority over our elected members of the council. You're elected by the voters. So there is a significant difference there that would have to be addressed by any public body made up of elected officials. In the middle, there are our appointed board and commission members. They are not elected by the voters. They serve at the mayor's pleasure, essentially, the mayor's appointment. And so they are different in the sense that their appointment to a board or commission is subject to her continuing approval to have them sit on that board. That is different from you as elected members. So when we are talking about appointed board members, there is an expectation, it's my understanding, that the code of conduct is included in the onboarding packets or information that appointed officials receive. But again, on the issue of authority, the mayor of the city, having appointed those individuals, does have the authority to remove for any particular reason an appointed individual. That's clearly not something that some authority she has over our elected officials.
Thank you. Yeah, I think.
Go ahead, Councilor.
Yeah, I think that the challenge with the elected bodies is always just that there isn't a higher employing force there other than the voters. And, you know, the assumption is that every 2 years, the voters could theoretically fire them. The question is, what do you do between those 2 years when something comes up? Or what do you do if the voters don't fire them over something? And that's where I think having some sort of other options like formal censure, official review, things like that could be helpful. Again, as I said earlier, I tend to lean toward sort of a hybrid model where you would have maybe either an outside panel, like an independent panel, or a actual, I guess in some cases, it sounds like some towns will hire a, outside legal firm to review it if it rises to a certain level. But you have some sort of independent entity or outside entity that's not part of the elected body, review the evidence, do whatever investigations are necessary and so forth, then present those findings to a body or a committee or something of the elected officials to start figuring out what to do about that. Because I think it's not great when the investigative process part of it is done by the elected officials. That's troubling to me. But ultimately, the elected officials are going to have to self-police because they are a sort of odd entity that only works for the voters. And so I think, you'd have to have some component like that because there's not a way for the city to, fire us for conduct. And so that's kind of the direction that I've personally been leaning at the moment. But I understand it's always going to be a weird solution, whatever we come up with, because it's not traditional employees, even though that is kind of confusing because, some of us are getting like health insurance through the city and, other things like that. And so in some senses, we're treated as if we are employees of the city, right? I get my flu shots at the city employee clinics, but ultimately I work for the voters.
Ms. Pitzy O'Brien, did you want to respond to something that was said? I noticed your hand go up.
Well, what I wanted to add was that I actually have a lot of experience in this particular area, not only in the employment area, but also in the area of elected bodies. In my previous community, all of our boards drafted and adopted a code of conduct. I spoke to the town manager early today, and he said, geez, Michelle, we should update those and look at those because it's been a while since you left us now. And also I serve on the Massachusetts Municipal personnel committee for personnel and labor relations. And I think maybe this was in your packet, I don't know, from our city clerk, but there's a best practice recommendation in there. And I was involved in developing that. So I've been in many of these discussions over the years, and I truly believe it is important for elected body to have these conversations. And I'm really happy to be a part of this conversation, and I hope to help you in this area. But my suggestion to you would be that to first look at what some of these leading organizations are recommending, not even just in Massachusetts. The International City County Management Association represents cities, councils across the nation. The laws will apply differently in different states, right? But there's samples that are out there. There's experience that are out there that can certainly be helpful. And start with setting the tone, because there's a difference between unlawful behavior and then what I call your house rules, your civility and professionalism, the respect you want and expect in the workplace, or, where you are working together as an elected body. And then end with the enforcement. Start out thinking about what is important to us as an organization, as a body, and end with the enforcement portion of it. And I learned that through developing that best practice, which I'm sure is in your packet from the MMA from 2020. And one of the bullets towards the end, if I recall, spoke about talking about enforcement at the end of a code of conduct or a standard for professionalism. And some, I can tell you, most of the communities that have done this, and I've spoken to several that have done this, they don't have any enforcement. There is a reminder every year, a training on it, and often a reminder by council leadership. Let's all take a look back at our code of conduct, things like that. But there are enforcement mechanisms that could be there, like a public reprimand, or, choosing not to indemnify an individual who acts inappropriately, things like that. But I think you'd fail the intent of this important conversation by talking about the enforcement part first. I think the most important part is to talk about, what should be our standard? What should be our standards for civility and professionalism? And obviously unlawful, harassment and discrimination, that is different. And I think we could probably take those things separately. So I wanted to add that because I do have experience in this area. I'm happy to help to the extent that my position allows me to do so, but I'm certainly willing to provide my experience and my expertise, as is our city solicitor, I believe. Yes.
Great. Thank you very much. President Albright, followed by Councilor Baker. President Albright.
Ms. Pitty O'Brien, I think you must have read my mind. You're right next to my square, and think the waves were coming in, because it's exactly, I was thinking about the docket item that we would put up, and I was hoping that, and I was about to ask you, and then you answered it in your statement, could you help us? Could the law department help us? And could we have the MMA also help us as we look to other councils, what they've done and what the best practices, things that are out there? As we review all of those, it would be wonderful if we could have your help in the process. And I think another part of the process is to talk to other council leadership, other cities, I'm talking about cities and towns, and ask them, how well has this worked in your city? What have you got and how well has it worked? Where are the flaws? What would you strengthen? So I think there's a lot of research that we have to do, and a lot of thoughtful study of these other codes of conduct that already exist. And I'm hoping that we could ask for the support from HR law and the MMA in this process. Is that so? And I think the answer to that is yes, based on what you just said.
I heard some voluntary assistance being provided.
I would believe the answer would be yes. I'm always happy. It is important to me, President Albright, to help wherever I can to set the tone for professionalism in our organization. So I'm happy to help wherever I can. I can add that the Massachusetts Municipal Association has they have an arm of different, professions, and they do have and you mentioned it, President Albright, the Massachusetts Municipal City council, city council association. They do presentations often. Actually, the president of that group is a member of the city council in Waltham. And I reached out to him earlier today to see if there was any feedback or materials that he could provide. There was one other resource I was thinking of, and I just lost it, but if it comes to me, I'm sorry, the UMass Collins Center. They do this on a consulting basis, but this is an area of work that they get involved in to support elected boards in contemplating these matters and doing that. There's obviously a cost to that, but there are unbelievable resources out there to help you in this process.
So, and I think, and I totally agree with you about let's think about enforcement, but let's not decide in advance what it is, because I think we have to know what it is, where are we going with it, and then we can figure out how it can be enforced, how it should be enforced, and how are other councils doing it and what works. So these are the kinds of things that I'm thinking about for putting in this docket item. And I thank you in advance for your help.
Thank you, President Albright. Councilor Baker?
So I want to just say again, I appreciate the comments of council as well, because I think they represent a perspective is vital for me and personally to take account of. But in the process of doing that, I guess I'm curious, the issue of conduct is something that obviously Congress has looked at. I wondered what precedents there are for not just in the other communities, but does the state legislature have any kind of code of conduct to our knowledge? Anyone know?
I'm sorry, I missed it. Does the state legislature have what?
The state legislature, the general court, have any independent code of conduct other than conflict of interest law?
I don't know of a specific code of conduct, but I know that both bodies in the general court, I believe, have their own committee on ethics that have been used when there was conduct. A recent Senate president was sort of accused of some misconduct, and the Committee on Ethics had to entertain that and publish a report. And it was up to the body to determine what to do about that. But there is a Committee on Ethics in each branch of the general court, as far as I know.
And I guess the other, I think it would be useful to learn, there are obviously things, if we're talking about that situation where there's conduct that we violate ethics that I think in one sort of behavior, but they're trying to talk about, as Ms. O'Brien, PC O'Brien indicated, standards of professionalism, civility, and some of the things I read from the rules originally. So I think that while it's important to keep enforcement at the back of the game, I think it's also important to think about how this plays out, because if it's just written down and doesn't influence behavior, I'm not sure we've done very much. But I'm certainly willing to continue the conversation. I didn't mean to say that we should push this down the road indefinitely, but I think it's hard to make a decision about what to do tonight on the basis of what information you already been provided about precedents elsewhere we ought to examine. And I'm glad to hear that we have those resources available.
Ms. Giuliano?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to add, I think Michelle said it beautifully in terms of how a great way to begin this work. And I think it's an excellent idea to look at enforcement once you've focused on what you want to do. And the reason why I say that is because I want the council to be mindful. We have of the distinction between some of the things you are talking about. You're talking about codes of conduct that involves things like professionalism and civility. That's one thing. Another thing I have heard discussed here is issues that may speak to potential discrimination or harassment of some sort. And a third thing I've heard discussed is ethics and conflict of interest. Those are three different things. And the council should be mindful of that because, for example, a code of conduct and some of the examples that the clerk shared really speak more to professionalism and civility and how a public body will deal with that. They don't speak to conflict of interest. And I know the counselors know this, but our state ethics laws are quite comprehensive in addressing true conflicts of interest. And they are an investigative body, and they do have the ability to render findings as a result of those investigations. So I just wanted to add that when we get to the point of discussing what enforcement is, we want to consider what resources are already available through our state agencies, what other resources are available that provide investigative processes and results or consequences. We want to think about that. So I just wanted to point that out. We in the law department are familiar with a number of the samples that were shared with you. We've also talked with our colleagues as well to find out what some of their experiences are, including communities that don't have anything, and whether or not they've considered something. So we're happy to share that with you as well as we go through the process. But one of the things that I have learned but would like to impart upon you is the importance of focusing on identifying what are the issues that you'd like to address. Then we can talk about how you would like to address them. And then finally, what are the consequences that are within your authority to do as a public body, and how you want those to be addressed by whom and how they be meted out. So lots of steps here that we can support the council through as we work on those various pieces that I mentioned.
Thank you very much. Councilor Noel.
Well, I just want to acknowledge, I really appreciate how thoughtful everybody has been tonight. I can't say enough about Ms. Pizzi O'Brien and Ms. Giuliani. Ms. Giuliani, you sort of said much more eloquently what I was trying to say at the beginning, that there's kind of different buckets, and some are, in my opinion, much more concerning than others, although they're all noteworthy, that we should strive to be the best we can be. I also just want to acknowledge that this is something that, if it's going to be dealt with, will be dealt with next term. I think that's the most prudent thing, that we move to hold this item tonight. Do we hold it when it's just going to disappear in 2 weeks? Is that still the protocol to hold it?
Yes.
I mean, this is our last meeting. We can hold it and it will disappear. We can NAN it, which feels a little too. I would rather hold it than NAN it. Let me put it that way.
Sure. So I'm going to move to hold it. I also just want to say that I will be on the other side of the rail come January 1st, but I do hope, based on the way folks have participated in this conversation, that there is support next term to revisit this. And I can't say I'm so impressed with, Ms. Giuliani and Ms. Pizzi O'Brien. I think we have such expertise here that it would be a shame not to take advantage of that.
Thank you, Councilor Noel.
Moving to hold it.
Councilor Noel has moved hold. I just want to add a couple comments. I generally like to let people speak, but I do want to weigh in if folks would indulge me for a minute. I agree with so much of what I've heard tonight, and I also appreciate the conversation. I appreciate the fact that this was brought up. I also appreciate the conversation, the thoughtfulness with which people have approached this. As I see it, well, also let me go back and say that I was a member of the Charter Commission, and on the Charter Commission, one of the things we talked about was whether to try to put some sort of language into the charter that dealt with issues of conflict of interest, ethics, code of conduct, and ultimately the conclusion of the Charter Commission, with which folks can agree or disagree, but the conclusion of the Charter Commission was that Chapter 268A of the general laws, referenced earlier by Ms. Giuliani, covers both ethics and conflict of interest in terms of municipal officials, including city councilors, including elected officials. And so it wasn't prudent to try and reinvent the wheel or put something else into either the city charter or into our ordinances. I think one of the questions before us is, do we want should there be a code of conduct, as articulated by a number of people, I think many of us agree that there should be a code of conduct applicable to the city council. I think the other questions that we need to answer, and I agree that tonight is not the night to answer it, but I do think we need to answer specifically what is that policy, what is the code of conduct, who enforces that policy, where we put that policy. Is it part of our ordinances? Do we seek to put it into our charter? Do we try to put it into the city council rules? And then lastly, who enforces that and what the possible consequences of violating that code of conduct are. I was also thinking about, as Councillor Humphrey referenced, the U.S. House of Representatives in that process. I thought that was a interesting process to watch unfold, with a House Committee on Ethics making a reference, a referral, and filing a report with the full House of Representatives and allowing the full House of Representatives to act. I am reminded of a provision in our charter, and I would appreciate law looking into this one as well. I believe most constitutions and/or charters have a provision for elected bodies that says something to the effect of the elected body being the judge and determiner of the election and qualifications of its members. And there is something to that effect in the charter relating to the city council as well. I believe it is usually that provision which is cited as the authority for the body to, for example, expel a member in the U.S. House of Representatives, or at least have the authority to discipline its members. In other words, that the body would be determining this person, this individual is no longer qualified to be a member of this body. So I would be interested to hear a legal opinion on that when a body is undertaking this and really trying to come up with some recommendations about what consequences are on the table that we could utilize. Having said all that, I do think that there's a motion on the table to hold. I think that is the right move for tonight. I would like to see us move on this as soon as possible after the new council starts. I think it'll be up to the new council what that looks like. If it's the Programs and Services Committee talking about council rules, or some subcommittee, or some ad hoc group of councilors who are going to entertain this with the assistance of the able-bodied folks like Michelle Pitsy O'Brien or Ali Giuliani or others. I think that would serve the council quite well. So I'm going to support hold. Councillor Baker.
Well, you went into what I was going to add, which is what is the steps after, because it's for the benefit of those who are not scholars of the council rules, a docket item that isn't disposed of by the end of the term automatically goes away and then has to be redocketed. So I just want to make sure that I'm persuaded that there's value in having this process go forward, and I just didn't want to see it disappear.
Could I just add that our new docket tracking system, Lord willing and the creek don't rise, will be available after our December 18th meeting for the new term. And councilors will be able to start uploading their own docket items for the new year after that last meeting. So I think we should get this one done right away.
Thank you, Madam President. Councilor Humphrey?
And I think I'm listed as the number 2 person on this, and I will be there in the new term. So I'm sure that I can redocket and circulate to our new council members for sign on. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Councilor Humphrey. Any more discussion on a motion to hold made by Councilor Noel? Okay. All those in favor of hold, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay. Thank you. We have 3 more items. And thank you to our city staff, Ms. Giuliani, Ms. Pitsy O'Brien. Really appreciate your contributions tonight and your willingness to come help us and share your wisdom with us. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
Item 402-23. This is the reappointment of Rakashi Chand as a Jackson Homestead trustee. Any discussion on that item? Councilor Humphrey.
Moving approval from Ward 5.
Councilor Humphrey has moved approval. Seeing no further comments, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, that's unanimous. Item 403-23, the reappointment of Russell Feldman as a Jackson Homestead trustee.
I think that's
Councilor
Ward 8,
Humphrey?
so I'll move it since Councilor Ryan's not here tonight.
Councilor Humphrey has moved approval. Any discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Unanimous as well. And then lastly, item 404-23, the reappointment of Rabbi Keith Stern to the Human Rights Commission. Councilor Greenberg.
This is Ward 1. I'll move approval, please.
Councilor Greenberg has moved approval. Any discussion on the motion? All right, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay.
I hope that the Human Rights Commission has a meeting soon, because I had heard that they hadn't met in a while, and it's obviously a challenging time in the city right now. So I know that he's not here. I'm just mentioning it because it's on the docket.
I've not heard that. Interesting. Ladies and gentlemen, people, sadly, I believe this brings us to the end of our programs and services term. I'm going to miss you all greatly. We have one member who is, I think just one member who's not going to be with us next term, Councilor Noel. We're going to miss you terribly. You have served as vice chair of this committee ably, well, effectively, thoughtfully. Thank you very much, both for your time as a councilor, but also as being what I think is the best vice chair on the city council.
Very kind of you. Very kind of you.
Mr. Chair, we want to thank you for your leadership of this committee, and I think for your sense of humor. I think.
Yeah, debatable. I understand.
Yeah,
No,
don't put that to a vote.
It has made our meetings interesting. So we really, you've done a great job. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam President. If no one else has anything else.
I just think we should Norton, who's been so helpful to us also.
Yes, excellent clerking work. Thank you so much.
100%.
Yes.
Jacqueline, I think folks don't even know exactly how much Jacqueline has done. She's been just fantastic and so helpful. All the documents you guys see, the reports, keeping us in line. Truly, Jacqueline, thank you so much for all your help this term.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure being with you guys.
She even came on a field trip once with us. That was crazy. I didn't think that committee clerks got to leave City Hall.
Yep, surprising or not, I do have a life outside of here.
Amazing.
All right. Well, thank you all very much. Have a wonderful night. Appreciate all the hard work this term. And I'll see you all soon.
Thank you. Good night.
Tomorrow.